You are now entering the Horror Sanctum.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5,
5,
4,
4,
3,
2,
2,
1.
1.
Happy New Year! We have completely forgotten how to record an episode. This is our fifth time trying to do this opening. So hello, welcome back to the Horror Sanctum and Happy New Year. I'm Jay, joined by John, Kellen, TJ, and Mr. Vito Trigo himself. So 2024 is upon us. This is our first episode of the year. So naturally, we're like, let's do a New Year's episode. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of great New Year's horror films. There's even less good ones, and there's even less ones that revolve around a train and David Copperfield. So naturally, to ring in the new year, we're going to be talking about 1980s Terror Train, starring Jamie Lee Curtis.
That's right. And the basic synopsis of Terror Train, Canadian production that was filmed back to back the month after they did. I believe they filmed Prom Night in 1980, also a Canadian production, in August and September. And then in November and December, I believe they filmed Terror Train in two different parts of Canada. The synopsis basically is 3 years after a prank went terribly awry, the 6 college students responsible are targeted by a masked killer at a New Year's Eve party aboard a moving train of terror. Pretty simple. I actually read how the writer got the idea of this, which was just fascinating. Basically, he had just watched a double feature one weekend night of Halloween for the first time and the Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor movie Silver Streak, which is on a train. And he was like, he told his wife, wouldn't it be cool if we could just make Halloween but on a train? And she said, that's a terrible idea. So he tentatively titled it Terrible Train and then shortened it to Terror Train, which is fascinating. He wrote like a 22-page treatment, and he sold it literally like the next day to this production company the next afternoon. So, I mean, it's kind of a pretty cool story that doesn't really happen that way. But I guess in 1980, Canada, it's the wild, wild northern west, I guess. This is kind of one of the early slashers. I mean, Halloween really was the one that created the slasher boom, and everybody was rushing in the next 2 or 3 years to really cash in on the cachet of everybody's just chasing the dollar. Like Halloween, for up until I believe the Blair Witch Project, was the most financially successful independent film in America for like 20 years. So, of course, everybody was wanting to chase the dollar. I mean, that's why. Also in 1980, Sean Cunningham didn't even have an idea other than, oh, slasher. They didn't have the term slasher, but killers killing people with knives and stabby things on a holiday. What's another scary holiday? Friday the 13th. So they just take an ad out in the paper, didn't have a concept, didn't have a script, sold it. And that was the days when as independent, particularly independent horror film producers, you could just come up with an idea, and if it already was doing well in the box office, yeah, as long as you keep the budget little, let's do it. Unfortunately, that produced a lot of really god-awful, terrible movies in that period of 1979 to about 1982, 83. That was really kind of the first wave era of the early slashers. It was really before we had the language of what the slashers were, but you could already tell around 1980, 81, 82, they were starting to kind of create a formula as they were going. And really, Terror Train, with the exception of the novelty of it being on a train, it is in a lot of ways like a prototypical slasher, particularly of that early era slasher, because it does all the things. You set up the scene at the beginning, where there's a flashback traumatic scene that happens to a main character that, of course, ends up being the killer. That happens. That happens in The Burning. You know, a lot of
Spoilers.
spoilers. Well, yeah, this is spoilers. uh, which I always thought was interesting because it's kind of interesting to look at it from modern modern times where we've seen so many films do that same formula where this is a terrible thing that happened to this kid. He's probably going to get his revenge later. Literally, the movie she just filmed a couple months before, Prom Night's the exact same type situation. The filming around the same time or shortly after 1980, 81, I think, was The Burning, which was the first film that the Weinsteins ever made that kind of helped them get on track. Did the exact same thing. You have the traumatic. However, it wasn't set as a trope enough to where the audience at the time would have immediately thought, oh, well, that kid that had the bad thing happen to him must have had to be the thing. Of course, about halfway through the film, everybody starts talking about, oh, it's obviously this kid. And then they try and throw David Copperfield under the bus about two-thirds of the way through the movie, where you think
You mean under the train?
well, they threw another dude under the train, but yes, I see what you did there. I appreciate it. And then of course they just kill him off too. The fun fact, David Copperfield's only acting role ever where he's not playing himself, David Copperfield. I believe his only role in a film that wasn't a magic special. Which some of his magic scenes, I think, is some of the best stuff in there, because I still don't know how he did all those disappearing things. And apparently he said he would
magic, TJ. He did it with magic.
I know, it's real magic. Real magic. Jazz hands and everything. But apparently he only agreed to be in the film if he could stage it for all the extras in the film to where they couldn't see like where the tricks are. So he had a lot of specifics around that.
Illusions, TJ. Couldn't see his illusions.
His illusions, yes. His real magic.
Wait, TJ.
Yeah.
Wait, but there's that one where he has the curtain and he
Yes.
disappears, and then I'm like, but wait, how did the extras not see the ones that were like kind of behind? Like how
I don't know, but that's his quote that he's quoted as saying the only way he agreed to do a thing. But yeah, I don't see how he wouldn't, unless he had like also a sheet behind him. But I
call bullshit, Copperfield.
Yeah.
Right now.
Well,
on this podcast, I say bullshit.
Well, it's pretty clear. I mean, he's a wizard. That's the answer.
He is a wizard.
He is, in fact, a wizard.
He did.
He did disappear.
He disappeared the Statue of Liberty. I mean,
Carney.
Let's get him on here to explain himself.
Okay.
We should. But enough about David Copperfield. About the film Terror Train, which I had just realized, I knew it had been remade last year in 2022. Actually, they did two Tubi originals. I guess they must have filmed at the same time. Terror Train and Terror Train 2 come out on Tubi as exclusives in 2022. But apparently it had already been remade as like a 2008 like a Hostel type torture porn on a train with Thora Birch. Thora Birch from Ghost World and I think she's in American Beauty. Yeah, she's like the star of that as the final girl, which is
she the little girl from Hocus Pocus?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was in The Walking Dead. I know what movie you're talking about. I've never seen it, but I've seen the
It's
poster.
just called Train from 2008. It's also on Tubi. I'm gonna have to look into it now. Apparently, it's like a torture porn type thing, but it's with like football players instead of medical students who have a lot of access to cadavers. Apparently, it was probably about the fourth or fifth time I've watched this over the years. I actually like Prom Night a little better than this one. I think it's a perfectly fine. I like that he's the killer trades up costumes and he's just using the costumes of the people that he kills. That's interesting. I think Ben Johnson from all those old westerns has obviously Southern accent. It probably is a little miscast as the train conductor because that and with probably a mostly Canadian crew and actors other than Jamie Lee Curtis, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. But I also think he's one of the brightest spots in the film because he's a good actor and he's interesting. So I liked a lot of the stuff that he did. I appreciate him in a movie that mostly exists for people to just get off in corners and get murdered one by one. This film is almost more like an Agatha Christie kind of whodunit. Only you pretty much know, especially in retrospect, who did it from the first scene, pretty much. And apparently all the main characters by midway through also know that that's who done it. It's just for a little bit, they think somehow that little skinny dude somehow totally changed his genetic makeup and become David Copperfield, which is probably the most unbelievable thing that happens in this film. You don't see a lot of the gore, though. They probably saved a lot on the budget. You see the after effects of some gore. You see some blood. You see a decapitated head here and there.
It's funny that you mentioned that, TJ, because I was actually listening to Roger Ebert,
yeah,
and then talk about like the old, the old one, and one of the first things they said was like it's just full of gore, and man, I was just like, what gore are you talking about, old man? Sorry,
there's really not a lot, but
no.
But I mean, people said that about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in '74 too, and almost all of that is theater of the mind and a little smattering of blood here and there. It gives the illusion that you probably see more than you do because you see the aftermath. You do probably see a fair amount of blood and gore, but it's not during a kill scene. I don't think you see any kill on screen other than maybe you see the Kenny at the end die on screen.
Yeah.
Presumably, I don't think he could survive falling out of the train into a block of ice and then going down the frozen river after being stabbed a bunch of times. But
never know.
Yeah, I think the most violence happens during the chase.
Yeah,
because she stabs him a few times. He pulls out her. He pulls out her earring.
Yeah,
the most violence happens in the chase.
That was cold blooded. The earring thing, man, that hurts. But I've always thought this. I'm not going to get into ratings yet, but I've always thought this was just kind of another slasher film that Jamie Lee Curtis made in between Halloween 1 and 2. And I always thought that Prom Night kind of overshadowed this one because that had a little more penetration in the American market because the people that own the rights to it decided to make a couple, 2 or 3 sequels. I forget if there's 3 or 4. I think there's
3
4
sequels, I believe. Yeah, 4 total.
I think there's 4 Prom Nights. 2 and 3 have to do with this Mary Lou girl that had nothing to do with Prom Night 1, and then you have another standalone. It's kind of like the Silent Night, Deadly Night kind of series there for a little bit, where it's standalone, totally different films, other than they tacked on Prom Night to try and, I guess, sell on the name value of that film, which probably tells you that it did better than Terror Train, at least in America. But I think this film made a little bit of money. It definitely lived on basic cable for a lot of years. That's where I watched it. I've probably seen this film in bits and pieces, probably dozens of times more than I've watched it straight all the way through. It's kind of iconic, the Groucho Marx character that the killer dresses as, but he only kills like one person in that outfit because of the change in outfits every time scenario, which I think is kind of cool. That's a thing you don't really see in a lot of slashers that come after this. I like the setting on the train, but I think this is one of those things that's largely overlooked, aside from the fact that it's one of those 5 or 6 horror films that Jamie Lee Curtis did at the start of her career before she totally went away from horror for 20 years.
It's also one of those 4 or 5 films that Kellen has seen before we decided to record,
which is astonishing to me, honestly.
I own it. I own this movie.
Well, I told John, John's like, he hasn't seen it. I said, well, he owns it, so he's seen it. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. He owns it. I think he's seen it.
I have seen it, and I own it.
All right. Well,
So,
that's
yeah.
a good segue for you to talk about how you know about this film, Kellen.
Well, Vito's going to go ahead and go because he's dressed for the part.
Okay, that works. I don't remember the order.
Let's
What's
go,
in your
Vito.
glass?
Well,
Cranberry
well.
ginger ale.
Well, look, what's the? I have to. This is not one of the. It's one of the few movies that I don't watch occasionally. I don't know what it is, because it's like, because it's a New Year's movie. You know what I mean? It's just something that I've never really been like, oh, I want to go see Terror Train. I remember seeking it out after it's referenced in Scream when I was younger, and I watched it when I was younger. So I watched it again. Once again, I watched it again, leading up to this discussion. And I was really on the fence about it. I was like, do I like this movie? And then I watched the remake on Tubi, and I was like, I do like this movie, because the one on Tubi really sucks. Like, really, like a lot.
Good, you saved me
A
from
lot.
watching it.
No. And then I doubled down and I watched the sequel on Tubi.
The sequel is the worst.
And I was like, wait a second, I like that one more than I was like, what this weird train where each movie I like more than the other one. So I'm like, whoa. And so I started and then I rewatched Terror Train again. I was like, I really like this movie. I like the beginning. The fucked up prank, even though the character of Doc is a TikToker. He's like, ooh, I'm gonna prank somebody, little motherfucker. And it's just like the prank. I think the prank is the strongest point and the weakest point of the movie, because it's effective, but you've already oh, that's our killer, So that's why I think it's the strongest point of the movie and the weakest. But I like the movie, and I think I'm going to segue from not talking about the movie, because I just want to talk about one motherfucking character, and that's Doc. I hate Doc. Never before was there. I can justify not relishing in a character's death, but the character of Doc, I'm like, yo, this piece of shit. He's a freaking sociopath who the entire time is enjoying messing with pledges, messing with his best friend. He set up his best friend in the movie to get caught with another girl for shits and giggles. And he basically traps Jamie Lee Curtis into a party that she can't escape. I'm like, this guy's a piece of shit.
And he's an asshole and Die Hard.
he's an
Hell,
asshole.
it's
in
Bubby.
Die Hard, too.
I think he's a sociopath. That's pretty safe.
Yeah.
Typecast.
Yeah.
Typecast.
Yeah. But while he's also one of the biggest pieces of shit in the horror genre, he's also one of the dumbest pieces of shit in the horror genre. Because he locks himself in his cabin on the train with the killer. Yeah, but come on, you could go outside. There's all these people. Strength in numbers, man. There's a whole party outside. But your dumbass decides to lock yourself inside a cabin. I'm like, you dumb son of a bitch. I hate your guts. You are legit stupid. And the only unsatisfying thing is that I did not get to see you get perished. You mother. I was like, oh, man. Never before have I disliked a character so much than Doc. I'm a med student. My nickname is Doc. Fuck you. I'm sorry.
That's just poor writing, right?
Right.
Doc Manley or something. Doc Man. I was like, I'm Dr. Man. Hi. I can't save my friend. My friend's dying. Oh my God. My friend's dying. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, I'm a doctor. Then do something, you dumbass.
He was completely worthless. Completely worthless.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. So
I like the movie too. I just hate Doc.
Yeah. So like I said, I've seen this movie before, and I liked it the first time I saw it. I liked it the second time I saw it. But this is a very strange film because it is boring. But it's boring in a way that's not boring, if that makes sense. It's like you don't see the gore. There's not a whole lot of action throughout it. So everything tells you this movie should be boring, but it moves along in a way where it doesn't feel as boring as it is. The party atmosphere maybe helps it. There's enough going on periodically to keep you interested. Jamie Lee Curtis, delightful as always. She plays worried better than most any other actress I can think of. But it's just such a weird film. It's like I said, it's hard to explain. It's not that the movie's bad. Like I said, I've watched it twice now. I've enjoyed it both times. It's just I'm sitting there watching it thinking, I could see how people wouldn't like this because it's just kind of a movie. like TJ said, it gets overshadowed, and I can see why. There's not really anything that draws you to want to come back to this film. There's nothing really iconic other than the Groucho Marx kind of mask that's on the cover, but that's only a small part of it.
It's kind of unremarkable, even though for the time it was a unique concept.
Right.
Yeah,
And that was my thinking too. Like, I can't explain what you're trying to explain. I can't explain it either. To me, it was like, I think it's an hour, 36 minutes, but it felt like 2 hours and 36 minutes.
Yeah. There's a reason we don't rewatch this one like every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm going to go off on a little David Copperfield rant here because I grew up, and probably everybody in this podcast right now grew up in the height of magicdom, when there were specials on TV all through the early 90s. Lance Burton was another big TV magician who you would see all the time. It spawned the Chris Angels Mind Freak kind of stuff later on, in the 2000s. But David Copperfield was the magician. He was the David Blaine before David Blaine was David Blaine. He was the event magician almost yearly, where he would do some big show, and it was like every commercial break, David Copperfield come up and then when we get back, I'm disappearing the Statue of Liberty, and he would show it like 40 times. Or when we get back, this Carnival cruise liner gone, and then he would do a whole bunch of other stuff, get cut in half, cut a girl in half, make the whole audience turn on their head. He would just always do these crazy things that seemed improbable. All the way down to the sleight of hand stuff. And so it was really fun watching him. And I would argue he is playing himself because he's only billed as the magician. So even though he's not David Copperfield, he's playing a magician called the Magician. Which reminds me, my favorite David Copperfield moment in all of everything is in Scrubs, because it's so hilarious when JD sees him, does the little coin disappearing, and then David Copperfield makes it disappear back, and he goes, "Oh, magic." Like he's making fun of himself. It cracks me up to this day, and I've seen that show 10 times straight through. Vito, you have a look on your face.
Well, the fact that you have this like love for David Copperfield, you're like,
Love him so much.
man, I'm in the fan club. I had the Facebook page. I had the MySpace page. I had everything. You've been shipping, David Copperfield for a long time.
I read the book until I realized it wasn't about the David Copperfield, and then I burned it in the backyard.
As a former English teacher, that's hilarious to me.
You've burned so many things in your backyard in your lifetime. There are some great stories of you burning shit in your backyard. Check out
true.
Weirdos, a podcast for stories like that.
But yeah, he's fun to have in this movie. I think it adds a nice little aside. It's almost like his whole part in the movie was to fill time. To be like, oh, there's stuff going on the train that's scary, but magic. And there's somebody died, but also magic. And it goes back to what Vito said. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like you and the producer of this movie would get along because they just threw him in there because they liked David Copperfield.
Well, it was not a mistake on their part.
No, they just like, I like David Copperfield. I'm the script. So
I can't think of a worse reason or a better reason to add him to a movie. I think he would make Saving Private Ryan better if during the storming of Normandy Beach he was just like doves.
I think they were padding the pages a little bit there, because he basically just does a whole routine there in the middle of the movie.
Well, and it does another thing like Vito was saying. It makes Doc really cement himself as a dick in this film because David Copperfield's doing some really good close-up magic, and he's like, "That's third grade stuff," and then he drops that knife on the card, and everybody's blown away, and Doc's like, "Whatever." like he was emo before emo was a thing, especially when he's covered up in the blanket. I could just see him in a used video or walking in the Black Parade. Also, you gotta love that the train conductor, who also knows magic, thinks that if the magician's the killer, the best way to keep him in the room is with a lock and chains, as if he hasn't been studying his entire life on how to escape that exact scenario.
He couldn't find the straitjacket to put him in. It's fine.
Oh, look, I'm gonna swallow the key. Oh my god, he got out. Magic. I think Vito also said it, maybe TJ as well. The killer is not a surprise. Like, the only surprise is when you realize he was the girl the whole time, but then when you look back, you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. But you knew it was going to be him. It was too obvious. Most movies, when they do it so obvious, they end up throwing you a curveball where it's like, oh no, it's his older brother, it was his best friend, or it's his dad, or like in Friday the 13th, it's not Jason Voorhees that we all know, it's the mom. It wasn't he comes back and kills later. But this one, they were just like, oh, look, they tortured this kid. Hope he doesn't go crazy and kill everybody. And then he obviously goes crazy and tries to kill everybody. The funniest thing in the whole movie is, and it probably wasn't even meant to be funny, it's when the killer at the end demands that she kiss him, and then when she kisses him, he freaks out like in the beginning of the movie and falls out of the train and lands not in the water where there could be a part 2 where he comes back, but lands and folds himself in half when he hits the rocks beside him.
Wait a minute there. No, he did not fall out of the train. Good old Ben Johnson came out of nowhere with a shovel and knocked his ass out. All right, come on. Give Ben Johnson his flowers.
He still fell out of the train. He wasn't like picked up and yeeted over the.
He got knocked. He was knocked. There's a shovel and a swing. All right,
but he still fell out of the train.
That's the best scene in the movie.
And I laughed because you could tell it was a dummy because when it hits the ground, the legs just fold over in half. But yeah. I don't know how to say I like the movie, but I don't like it. It's the perfect meh horror film. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis is a scream queen. This is her sowing her oats after Halloween and starting to become officially the scream queen, the greatest scream queen of all time. And if you Google top 10 scream queens, she's going to be at the number 1 on every list, and rightfully so. She cemented herself, especially coming back to the Halloween franchise, even the new ones that I'm not a big fan of. She's still great in those. She's a great actress in general. So, props to her for jumping into this film and, being great as always. But it's just a movie that, it's one of those ones where if it's on TV, I'm not stopping.
Yeah. Terror Train, I've seen this a lot. I first saw it on IFC. It's one of those Canadian slashers like we've talked about that has it's an early slasher. All the Canadian slashers I have a very soft spot in my heart for. I think they had a lot of tax incentives at the time. So like Prom Night, Curtains, My Bloody Valentine, all of them were made. And the thing I love about them is there's something about the cinematography and the atmosphere in Canadian slashers that's so welcoming. I don't know if it's the haziness on the camera. The camera work in all of these, it's always like a slight fog, a slight smoke to it. Like there's something about it. It's not necessarily dreamlike, but it just any of these old slashers, especially Canadian slashers, when you start watching it, you're there. Like you're in that time period. It takes you right back to it. The director of this, Roger Spottiswoode, is most known for Turner and Hooch, which could not be more opposite of this movie, like total 180. The cinematographer for this movie was actually the cinematographer for most of Stanley Kubrick's movies. So Clockwork Orange, 2001. So that's one of the reasons the camera work is so good. In fact, there was a story on the Blu-ray about how he would set up the shots, and he would be basically like telling the director, like, you've got 5 minutes for this, and I get 5 minutes for this. And the director was so intimidated by him. He was like, okay, sure. Like, because he's like, this guy's got such a reputation. Like, I don't want to tell him no. The beginning, though, and the thing I love about openings to these kind of slashers, kind of like this, like Hell Night, is they just start. There's no real fancy credits. They just start. Like, you start at a party, it's just you're there. And people don't really do that anymore. People have these long, drawn-out intros now, and that's kind of fun. There's something charming about that with older horror movies. You know, the prank itself is ridiculous, right? It's abuse of a corpse. That's absurd. So obviously that was way too far. I agree.
Yeah, who let these kids have free range of the cadaver lab? Like,
yeah, you would go to prison.
Scene, they're like, I got a finger, I got a hand.
I think Night of the Creeps stole that idea a few years later too.
Yeah, that's possible. That's true, because Brad in that movie wants them to steal the corpse. That probably is where they got it from. But yeah, it's very obvious that Kenny is the killer. And like you were talking about, you see him in the movie. It's pretty clear after you watch it who he is. But something interesting is the character of Kenny is the actor's name is Derek McKinnon. So Derek McKinnon has a weird tie to a killer. There was a killer named Luca Magnotta, and he was on a Netflix series. It was called Don't Fuck with Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer. And it was about a guy who basically was like this fashion guy, and he was in a relationship with someone, and he murdered this young man. I believe his name was Justin Lin. And Derek McKinnon was actually Luca Magnotta's neighbor in an apartment complex. And he was the only person that Luca Magnotta would talk to. And Luca Magnotta was apparently a fan of the film, and was like really had a kinsmanship with him and would talk to him. So it's kind of creepy. Like, he actually was the only guy that talked to this guy. And later on, it turned this guy was a killer and later suspected of other murders. So
has anyone seen that besides John and I? Don't Fuck with Cats. I hate that dude so much.
He's the worst.
Don't watch it if you're sensitive to animal cruelty. I struggled with it, but I've been told by so many people that it's so good you have to watch it. And I kind of covered my eyes through some of it, but it's a good series for sure.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it is hard because like the cat stuff, that's true. That's just like as bad as all of it in it. The one thing I noticed watching this was kids in the 70s and 80s. I really do feel like they partied way crazier than kids now. They were insane. Kids back then, like if this was any representation of college kids, they were out of their mind with some of the shit they were doing. And it was like anything goes. The movie itself is very mediocre. It is boring. It is drawn out. It's odd. There's a lot of odd dialogue in it. There's a lot of things that the writer puts in that they never touch on. Like there's the scene where Doc is talking to his friend, and he's like, well, you know, if she ever leaves you always got me. And he's like, yeah, right. And he's like, no, I mean it. And it's like, are they hitting it like maybe like a gay romance? Like
I noticed that for the first time this last watch, like, oh, there's a homosexual subtext there.
Yeah, it's weird.
John.
Yeah.
John. He wanted Mitchie and he wanted Mo. He wanted them both. He was greedy. He didn't want anybody else to have it. He just wanted them at his disposal. You know, he's wanted them all.
He wanted a three-way. Yeah, well, that's believable. I mean,
Chasing Amy.
Yeah, right. Chasing Amy. Chasing Amy was inspired by this movie. Hart Bochner, that actor, yeah, he's most known as Ellis from Die Hard. He's been in a lot of things. He was a dickhead in Die Hard. Gets himself killed. John McClane can't bail him out of his idiocy when he's messing with Hans Gruber. There's, like you were talking about, everyone said there's not enough kills. Really the on-screen kills, there is none. You just see things, like you see the aftermath. You see Hart Bochner die, and he does this like death rattle. He's like, oh, right before it cuts. And the best part of this movie, I think TJ might have touched on this, is Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is a great actor. Ben Johnson was famously in a lot of John Wayne films. Great Western actor. He was also in The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which that movie is tremendous. I recommend it for anyone. He's really so good that he's honestly too good for this movie. There's a couple of scenes with him in this movie where he's talking. And I just thought to myself, like, oh my God, he's so much better than this movie. Like, it's like they really had to convince him to do this. And I mean, it's like that when you have a really great actor. And
It also feels like he ad-libbed about half of his lines.
Yeah, I could see that. It does seem like he probably would do that. And he probably wouldn't listen. He seems like one of those guys that's so older, he probably would just do what he wanted to do. As far as Jamie Lee Curtis goes, she's fine in it. There's not really much happening with her. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where after she did Halloween, she had her Scream Queen phase with this. She did Terror Train, she did Fog, she did Road Games, she did Halloween 2. And it's like, I think she was kind of over it. I think after the Fog, she was over it. And I think she just was kind of phoning it in. Not that she's not a great actress, but I think by that point, she was definitely like, I don't want to be this person anymore. So you can kind of see that in her face, even like Prom Night. I don't love Prom Night, but you can just sort of see that phoning it in thing. She's never been able to be Laurie Strode in those films, right? So
she was definitely flat in this one. Like, she felt very flat the whole time.
Yeah, I think this is. I think. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I think this is her weakest performance out of the 4 horror films that she did. Because there's not a whole lot there for her to do, unlike the other ones. And and her scream sounds exactly like Halloween. I don't know what it is, but it sounds exactly. I'm like, I could hear. I had it on the other room. Like, is Halloween playing? I'm like, oh no, it's Terror Train. It just sounds exactly like Halloween.
Yeah, especially when she, like in Halloween, when she discovers the bodies. It's kind of like it is.
They probably
like
just canned her laugh and used it when they were editing it together.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
The Wilhelm scream that's in half the movies since that was invented. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it's the most famous horror scream. So they probably can a bunch of screams and just use whatever she's already used if they didn't like the one.
You just referenced that on another episode we've recorded recently.
Yeah, you did. Well,
I don't remember which one. He really
loves the Wilhelm scream.
It may be in the past, it may be in the future, but you referenced that recently.
As far as the movie, I mean, there's something about it that is sort of comforting to me, and I think it's just because I love slashers, and I don't know what it is. It's just like, it's something you can put on a rainy day. Definitely, obviously, New Year's when it's cold, winter. It's just, there's something about it that's comforting. The one thing that I just always think of with this movie is Kenny doing that damn spin with the bed sheets. And I want someone to go to a horror con, dress like Kenny, and I want them to do that spin. We can call it the spin cycle. They just twirl around in their bed sheets.
Whoever's name starts with a K, that's what they can cosplay next convention we go to.
That's a challenge.
Oh, you just gotta lose like 50 pounds though, buddy, because or else it's not gonna be as effective.
Yeah, that dude was skinny.
But
super skinny.
I mean, I do like it, but it's problematic. I don't love it, so I'm curious to see everybody's kills and ratings because I'm thinking we're all feeling the same thing.
Yeah, we'll probably skip kills since, like we said, a lot of them you don't really necessarily see. But this movie it seems it's a conundrum. We like this movie and we don't like this movie at the same time, and it's very hard to explain both sides. And I'm the same way. Like, Kellen hit it on the head for me. Like, I watched it again today, and I own it. I've seen it a few times. But I'm watching it today, and I'm like, what fucking time is it? Like, how long has this movie been on? Like, it just feels like it drags, and I don't know why, because it's not a long movie, and I think the pacing is fine. Like, I think it moves at the right pace, but.
And if you watch it on Tubi, it's about 25 minutes extra long.
Yeah. The only notes I really had were that, and then the different masks that he uses. That was my favorite part of the entire film. Is it's not a set mask. He just puts on whoever he kills. He puts on their outfit. I enjoyed that a lot. Vito.
Yeah, I just had a thought. Maybe it feels so much longer because it's that claustrophobic feel of being on the train, and since it's technically moving, but we're not actually going anywhere. So we don't feel like we've actually done anything.
That's true.
You may be right, because Snowpiercer felt the same way, but Snowpiercer's, I really enjoyed that movie, but it still feels long.
See, I love Snowpiercer. That one didn't feel long to me. Probably because the action's a little bit more turned up.
Yeah.
I love Snowpiercer. But but yeah, it's just one of those things. Like Jamie Lee Curtis is fine. Like she's flat. John, you also talked about how it looks when it's a Canadian made film, and that's not something you really think about, but it is there, and it's hard to explain as well. I just like
it kind of looks like they rub Vaseline on the
that's
lens.
what I was gonna say, like someone just smudged the lens,
which they do in some films to get that look.
Yeah. But here's the question for everybody: do you consider this a classic horror film?
No.
No. See, I do. I don't. Again, I can't quite explain why. There's just a nostalgia to it. Jamie Lee Curtis being in it helps.
I consider Prom Night a classic horror film, but I don't consider this one. I always considered this one like the little redheaded stepchild of Prom Night.
Yeah. Also, it's one of those things where I said earlier, there's not that many New Year's Eve horror films, so maybe that's part of why
it's
like
still better than New Year's Evil, which is god awful.
New Year's Evil.
Now, Jay,
I hate that song.
Off. They had a lot of ideas. There was a lot of good ideas in there. They just didn't expand upon certain ideas or really like utilize concepts. You know, like the changing costumes. They could have done a whole thing there where all of a sudden, oh, he's right behind her, or like all of a sudden, like it was like a lot of ideas in there that just didn't get utilized very well. But
the mask changing was a good part too. That was a very unique twist, and it made sense to help him move through the train because it is claustrophobic.
Yeah, and you never knew who he was. That was probably the best part of the entire film, I think. But yeah, there's not much more I can say on it than that. So we'll go around, do our ratings. We'll close up shop. I gave it a 3 because it does, and it may just be the nostalgia, but it does feel a little classic to me. So I stuck with 3. TJ?
I really all day went between 2.5 and 3 on this one, but I just have always intertwined this one and Prom Night together, and I think Prom Night's a 3 and this one isn't, so I'm gonna go 2.5. It's just middle of the road for me. I don't rewatch it a whole lot. I wait a number of years until I kind of forget some of the parts of the plot, and I'm like, oh yeah, the David Copperfield, the Groucho Marx, the twisty turny guy. Yeah, I got you.
Vito?
I give it a 3. I mean, it's a so-so stew.
I will say I didn't hate the remake. Wait, come back, reel him back in. Come back, Vito, come back. I don't know why, but I've only seen it once. If I go back and watch it, I may change my mind. But when I watched it initially, I'm like, this could have been worse.
Now, what I did was I watched Terror Train, and then I watched the remake immediately afterwards. So that's why I was like, oh. And the ending, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's some nonsensical. I'm like, I don't believe for a second you're the killer. Oh, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you?
So it's not an exact remake of the plot, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, no, okay. No. Now, the first 2 movies, the movies, the first remake happens on Halloween, and then the sequel to the remake happens on New Year's Eve.
And
because
there's a magician.
Let's go.
Don't have to ask. There is a magician involved.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Kellen.
Yeah, I'm with TJ. It's just very mid. It's such a mid slasher film, and I know we didn't go over our kills, but it for the obvious other reason because it's Doc, everyone's favorite Doc. Couldn't wait for that guy to die. So I give it a 2.5. I mean, like I said, it's not one that I care to ever watch again, but it's not a movie that I despise to the point that I don't want to watch it, if that makes sense. Like, if I never watch it again, that's okay. If I'm at somebody's house and like, hey, let's watch Terror Train, sure, why not?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
One thing I really did appreciate this time watching it again, because I've seen this so many times, probably at least 30 times. But
wow.
Yeah, I
on purpose.
Right. I don't know why, but I did like that Ben Johnson was very relaxed and calm about investigating things. Like, at first, he's not panicking. he's kind of like not telling people what's happening. He's like, okay, I don't know what this is. Like he's very much acting like a rational person in that scenario. And I really like that he was, because a lot of times people just do stupid shit in horror movies, and he really didn't. He did what he had to do. As far as ratings, yeah, it's not great, but I'm with Jay. I mean, I'm nostalgic. Something about it. I like it. So I'm going to say 3 out of 5. That's fair.
Fair. That puts us in a 2.8. We'll call it a 3. So yeah, there you go. Terror Train, 3, whatever we want to call them, 3 cabooses. All right, so that's going to wrap up for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you have Amazon Music, we have a playlist over there. And come join the Horror Sanctum over on Facebook. And come back and join us next week, where we'll be talking about 2017's The Ritual, which we did an episode with director Brent McCorkle, who directed this year's Jesus Revolution. Yes, I said that correctly. You heard it correctly. The director of Jesus Revolution is joining us for next week's episode. Vito, thank you as always. You're the best. And that's going to be it for this episode. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, TJ, and Vito. And until next time,
Keep it spooky.
Sorry.
before we head out, this is like a bonus segment. What was your favorite movie of 2023? So I narrowed it down to When
Horror
Evil Lurks.
movie.
Horror movie.
Horror movie.
I narrow it down to When Evil Lurks and Onyx, the Fortuitous. I think I'm going to go with Onyx just because I've watched it 3 times. When Evil Lurks is not necessarily a movie I'm going to go like, you know what I really want to watch today? I want to watch this little girl get ravished by a giant dog. So for me, recapping 2023 real quick before we sign off, I think Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls is my favorite movie of the year. Let's pass it to Kellen.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not recency biased. It's a movie that I will definitely watch multiple times because the humor's so great in it. I was quoting it to my boss earlier. God damn, you did your boy dirty. But my second would probably be Barbarian of movies I've watched this year.
Wait, that was 2022.
But for me, I only saw it the first time 2023. So
that's not the game that we're playing right here.
Well, yeah, you could have watched The Godfather for the first time.
Right.
You can't.
Star Wars is my favorite movie.
You know, I really liked that Gone with the Wind. Boy, howdy, is that a top tier classic?
All right, Vito, what do you think was your favorite 2023 horror flick?
Oh, I gotta go with the new. Oh fuck! You messed with my brain there. I totally forgot about Scream 6. Oh shit! Nah, I gotta go with Hell House, the new Hell House one.
That was good.
I think that's the second of the best of the franchise.
Yeah.
Like one,
Yeah.
was it 5 or 4?
That's
1,
4.
4, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
I really enjoyed that more so than I thought I would. So, yeah,
I did too, because the third one I didn't. They kind of started going in a direction. I'm like, I don't know if I like that, but I liked it for sure. That one and The House is the October Bill. Like those two. I wish they would make one of those. Like I love both those. All right, John, what was your favorite 2023 horror flick?
Favorite definitely is Thanksgiving. Gotta represent. Love Thanksgiving. And I really gotta represent.
TJ just realized what his was.
I forgot about Thanksgiving.
I really gotta
And I forgot
represent
Evil Dead
Renfield,
Rise.
too.
Evil Dead Rise.
I was
this
about
year.
to say, I'm surprised nobody
damn.
mentioned Evil Dead Rise. I was
just scrolling through a list and I saw it and I was like, oh, that was so good.
I don't think Evil Dead Rise holds up as much.
You
like,
shut your whore mouth.
Yeah, you shut your mouth.
I don't think
shut
it
up.
does.
Shut up right now.
I understand that.
Yeah. Turn it off. Turn it off.
I think everybody was Rolodexing in their minds, going like, "Wait, what classifies as 2023?" You know, like, wait,
Yeah,
what?
You looked at your phone. I saw you looking at your phone. Vito.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, because I pondered asking you guys, telling you guys beforehand, like, hey, I'm going to ask this after. Like, no, fuck that. Let's just put him on the spot. All right,
And then
TJ.
you gave
up.
me hell.
I
so
gave
thanks.
up. I just was like, oh, Hell House. Yeah, that's why I was like,
until
what
John
I had fun with.
just brought up Thanksgiving. To me, I think the three best films to me are Onyx, When Evil Lurks, and Thanksgiving. But there's a high probability I won't watch Evil Lurks again, but maybe one or two more times in my life, just because of the content of it, and it's a little bit of a hard watch. I've already watched Onyx like 3 times. The Blu-ray just come in the mail today, which I ordered on pre-order because even though we got a screener of it, I still was streaming it when it come on Screenbox. It's just, that is a cult classic, literally in the making. Thanksgiving is going to be the same thing. I'm going to watch Thanksgiving every year, but gun to head, if I had to say best, I'd still say Onyx.
Yeah. Come on our show, Andrew. We love you.
Bowser.
We do love you, Andrew Bowser.
I forgot about Evil Dead 2. That's what's crazy. Like a calendar year, like we saw Scream 6 in theaters in March, and it feels like it was 2 years ago. So
it was a good year for horror.
It was a very good year.
And I will say, Onyx, as much I love Onyx, but to me, that's more of like a comedy. Like
it's
a
horror
wonderful.
comedy.
Yeah, I guess it's just
There's ghouls, demons, and ghouls.
I guess there is demons.
Lindsay hates it. She doesn't get it. I remember texting TJ. I'm like, Lindsay doesn't understand it, and you said, "Well, closed captioning helps." I busted out live. I'm like, "No, she understands what he's saying. She just doesn't understand the humor." But what's also funny is a couple of weeks ago, my mom came over and I showed her a trailer of something, and it was like all Onyx. I'm like, "Watch this." She loved him. Like we watched like 10 videos of him, and she just thought he was hilarious. So
I don't know.
All right.
Except now his new thing is for sure, because he's all Hollywood now.
Because he moved to the West Coast for sure.
For sure.
All right, Vito. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Big Vito.
Thank you.
Surprised nobody brought up the only nudity in this film was the girl that wasn't wearing a shirt but had pants around her boobs for half the film.
And it was the cadaver. It was the cadaver.
Well, that doesn't count.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah,
they're dead,
that wasn't a dress. That was just
nudity.
Steve Urkel pants over her chest, right?
Yeah, she was just like bloop.
So random. That girl was in The Fly. That girl with the overall.
Oh, really?
She was the prostitute that Jeff Goldblum picks up in The Fly, where he's like starting to change and gets all the energy.
That tracks. Yeah.
All right.
Speaking
I'm gonna
of
go
Onyx, what
eat
was it he was
dinner.
doing in the review video? What was it he kept saying? Are you talking about what movie was it?
Rango.
Rango?
Did you
talk
talk
about
about
Rango?
Rango?
Are you talking about
Did you mean
Rango?
I
Did you
think that's one of the
Rango?
funniest things he's done. And Lindsay's just like, why is that funny? I'm like, it's fucking hilarious. I don't know why it's funny, but it is. It's hilarious. Did you mean Rango? Rango?
Did you mean
talking about
Rango?
What's
Did you
also
mean
funny?
Rango?
Did anybody see his review of Hereditary? He hates Hereditary. He
Really?
hated it.
Does he?
Yeah, watch that one. Because he
Nice.
has an uncut version because he said his segment went too long. So he has a director's cut of it. He hated that movie so fucking much.
Wow.
Yeah, I was shocked by that.
I watched that movie with my pastor in Portland, Oregon.
Fun.
I've seen it
I
once.
The only movie I've seen with a pastor was 28 Days Later, and then you see Cillian Murphy's dick like the first 5 minutes of it. So
Legit.
good times. All right. Adios, amigos.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy
New Year.
As always.
Today's date is the 20th, so Merry Christmas.
Don't play with cadavers and don't do pranks with cadavers.
And don't twirl around in bed sheets.
10,
10,
9,
Hey,
8,
Hey.
7,
It's
5. We can't even count.
What the fuck?
3, 2, 1.
You said 1, 2, 5 second pause. What the hell was that?
I said I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Here we go.
And I did it in my head. 1, 2, 3, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10.
Christ almighty. All right, here we go.
Okay.
We're going in your heads. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll count.
Why don't you go 7, 8, 9, and then we'll all say 10 with you and count down backwards?
Oh, that's
for
a good
10.
idea. I like that. That's
Or
smart.
like 8, 9, and then we'll all say 10 so that we start at the same time.
Well, I just don't want when we start the beginning for it to have something stupid before the countdown, like my face, like 9. You know,
Yeah,
so there needs to be a little bit of a gap between.
that's true.
So just wait a second before you say 10. How's that?
Fair.
All right. 7, 8, 9,
10,
10,
9,
Hey.
Hey.
What?
Seven.
Dude, why are you counting so slow? I hate this. I hate all of this. I'm out. Bye. Bye forever. Why are you counting so slow?
This is a lot harder than it.
Bitch.
It is.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
It's like
Why are
syncing
you
up.
counting so slow? 10.
10,
Mississippi.
9, 8. All right.
Okay.
10,
8, 9.
8. That's the speed. 10, 9, 8. Okay.
Okay.
7, 8, 9,
10.
10, 9,
9,
8.
8.
Just fuck
We
it. I'll do it.
suck. We're
I'll
the
do it
worst.
myself. I will
Do it in
myself.
post.
All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
4,
3,
3.
2, 1. Happy New Year,
Happy
everybody.
New
Happy
Year.
New Year. The director's cut will have us doing that 10 fucking times before we got it right. But hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast and Happy New Year. This is our first episode of the year. And as usual, I'm Jay, joined by John, Kellen, TJ, and also Vito himself. So 2024 is upon us. So let's start off right. There's not a lot of great New Year's horror movies. There's even less good ones, and there's even less ones that revolve around a train and feature David Copperfield. So naturally, to ring in the new year, we're going to be talking about 1980s Terror Train, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. And I just realized we didn't talk about what order we're going to go in.
And Kellen
This
just
episode
texted
is
about it.
fucked.
I sent the message when you started talking. What is this, amateur hours?
We have to
God
like
damn.
psychically connect here.
All right, TJ, you're gonna have to cut out this whole beginning. All right, I'm just gonna start from scratch. Let's go. Me, TJ. TJ, can you give the synopsis?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, you, Vito, Kellen, John, me. All right. And if you want to join me at 5 or whatever, do it. All right.